Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the panelists. Dr. Atkinson, thank you for being here this morning. I feel like one thing I learned at being in the private sector is that you can design product and features, and you can say, this is what we want to attack, and this is what we want to do. But if you haven't properly assessed the environment in which that product development is happening, then you may miss the fundamentals of what you're trying to achieve. And it seems to me that your testimony today has hit on the fundamentals of what we are looking at here in the tax code debate, not about this tax versus that tax or longevity or what have you, but what environment are we in? And you clearly outline that we're in an information age environment where innovation can flow to anywhere it wants, and that the tax codes and policies of these various nations are attracting more on the manufacturing side than we in the United States, and in fact, we're losing on the manufacturing side. So, and thank you for your innovative ideas on the patent box and what you just said about the R&D tax credit as it applies to training. So my question is, how can we put a model to the outcome of those policies that you're suggesting in the context of getting people to better understand what's at stake? I know you had a 1 ratio in there on some nations, you know, a 1 to 3 ratio or 1.5 to 3 ratio on changing the tax code. But could we say on this tax credit as it relates to putting manufacturing under the R&D, here would be the yield, so that we could, you know, better move forward on these policies?
Is your question sort of what kinds of real outcomes should we be striving for and being able to measure?
It's very frustrating to live in Washington State. We know that we need 20,000 aerospace jobs in the next 10 years, plain and simple. And we could probably come up with a whole host of other jobs so to me, it's very clear. It's frustrating to know that and to then come here and say, okay, well, why can't we get more on job training, knowing that we've lost some of the edge in manufacturing? So what output could you put to this R&D tax credit expansion to job training that would give my colleagues some confidence to move forward on that kind of idea?
Well, I think what we could try to have as a goal is to restore corporate business training in workers as a share of the economy to back where it was a decade ago, and try to get that done within 5 years. And that, to me, if we could do that, we would be a much more competitive nation. So companies like Boeing and Intel and a whole lot of other companies who are already training their workers would be able to do more and would do more, and we'd become more competitive. I think the same thing with R&D. U.S. companies have expanded their corporate R&D over twice as fast overseas as they have here domestically. And in part, it's because our R&D credit, frankly, is not very generous anymore. We're 23rd now in the world. So we haven't kept up, and I think if we did, we'd see real measurable outcomes.
So on the training, get it back up to the level of investment? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yes, up to the level of investment. The investment has actually dropped over the last 10 years, and I think a goal for our nation could be to get it back to where it was 10 years ago, that the companies are just putting more money into getting their workers with higher skills.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say when you look at this phenomenon you're saying of employees spending less time at a company, what do you think that phenomenon reflects?
Oh, I think it reflects two things. I think it reflects, on the one hand, workers who just have, because of the way the economy's evolved, less of their own loyalty. They want to move along. And at the same time, I think it reflects companies having less loyalty to their workers. That's just the way the economy's evolved. Companies 2 decades ago were very, very recalcitrant to lay off workers because they didn't want to lose those skills. You compare that to Germany, for example. German companies tend to retain workers because they don't want to, they've put all this money into their workers in training, they don't want to lose them, so they tend to retain them more. U.S. companies don't do that, again, partly because of short-term financial pressures.
But you think that R&D credit for training would shore up both the security of the employee and the employer's investment in that employee?
Absolutely. I think it would do two things. The company now would have more at stake, if you will, and more investment in that person. They'd be less likely to let them go unless they really had to. But the second thing it would do is even if the company had to let workers go, and that happens all the time for business reasons, the worker themselves would have better skills, stronger skills, and it would be easier for them to go and get another job at a comparable wage.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me ask this question of you, Ms. Gravel, because with your textbooks and the writing you've done, you constantly keep coming back to a concept that seems to me to make a lot of sense, and that's to simplify the system and try to reduce some of the gaming that goes on with it. And I want to ask you about deferral